Alright, so today we'll be diving into another Jordan Peterson video. And you guys know I really enjoy this man's perspective. I really enjoy the way he constructs his arguments, and I do believe that he plays a vital role in ensuring the upholding of traditional values in society and the logical and rational way of thinking in today's society, which is very, very important in this era of degeneracy that we currently find ourselves in. If you're new to the channel, make sure that you subscribe, make sure that you share the videos with friends and family as wide as possible. The more you share the videos, the more you like the videos, the more the algorithm shows it to people, and that's how we can just grow our family. So make sure you join the family by subscribing. Other than that, welcome to Goals and Growth. Let's check this out. Jordan Peterson destroys disrespectful feminists repeatedly. Let's check it out.
But when you talk, say, about domestic violence, and there's a sort of thesis behind it, and I'm putting it in a bit of a nutshell here, so feel free to rephrase it, that men are, in the end, if men are pushed too far by a too aggressive of feminism, there will be a backlash, and that there is, there's a sort of undercurrent of violence, be it verbal.
Oh, that's a warning, not a warning, not a commentary
it's a warning
on the
that
utility
kind
of
of
that.
suggests that there may be sort of fault in those who push progressivism too far. They will get a backlash. Some people, of course, see that as a bit of a permissive environment for bad behavior.
Well, people tend to confuse describing the likelihood of something with supporting the fact that it exists, and I'm describing the likelihood of something, not supporting the fact that it exists. If you push too far on the left, you're going to get a backlash on the right. That's how things work.
Yep.
And this is just a derivation of that, as far as I'm concerned.
How does that work in the context of domestic violence?
Oh, I don't think it's applicable in the context of domestic violence at all. I think those things are completely separate issues.
I mean, you were mentioning to me just as we were chatting.
And I was speaking only politically with regards to the backlash. That was a comment on political
backlash. Yeah.
It had nothing to do with domestic violence. That's a whole different issue.
But violence often pops up in your work as something you think drives things. That I think you've said in relations between men are regulated by a background threat of force, and in a sense that's why men have difficulty with women. Is it really?
No,
so?
That's why men have difficulty with women who are completely out of control. But
who should control women?
Well, other women themselves, men, society, just like everyone is controlled. I mean, you're controlled by society, I'm controlled by society, and thank God for that. I mean,
funny. I mean, you described yourself as a liberal earlier, and
So the argument is that the relationship between men, right? Whether it be a work relationship, whether it be just as friends, is regulated by threat of force. So meaning, does that necessarily mean that men always revert to force or to authority to solve problems? It might be. But we know that men and women have different methods of problem solving. Men and women have different ways of approaching issues, of approaching conflict. Oftentimes, males, not surprisingly, are using the authority, right? The authority, the threat of power, right? That's what they're using to solve problems between them, okay? But women, on the other hand, might solve problems between them differently. That's how I understand it, at least.
Politically, with regards to the backlash, that was a comment on political backlash. It had nothing to do with domestic violence. That's a whole different issue.
But violence often pops up in your work as something you think drives things. That I think you've said in relations between men are regulated by a background threat of force, and in a sense that's why men have difficulty with women. Is it really?
No,
so?
That's why men have difficulty with women who are completely out of control. But
who should control women?
Well, other women themselves, men, society, just like everyone is controlled. I mean, you're controlled by society, I'm controlled by society, and thank God for that. I mean,
funny. I mean, you described yourself as a liberal earlier, and I think a liberal doesn't think that a society controls women or men.
Well, let's say regulates. I'm a psychologist as well.
But what is an out-of-control woman? What is this creature? How do we know when we met one?
Let's hear it.
Well, I'm sure that you've met women in your life that acted towards you in a bullying and detestable manner. It's very difficult for women to cope with that because they don't have any real recourse. And female bullying can be unbelievably vicious. And usually
I would argue that it can even be more vicious than, as we said, males often, let's say, if you get bullied by a man or bullied by a male in general, right? They use force. They use that authority. They use that force. But female bullying is much more. It's much more emotional. It's much more calculated, and it's vicious. But because oftentimes they target specific traits of the other woman, they make them feel not valuable enough, not good enough. But male bullying, in a sense, is more physical than emotional. Of course, it will have an emotional toll. And I'm no psychologist by any means. I'm no psychologist by any stretch, but at the same time, you have to think to yourself that the stereotypical bully or the stereotypical male bully uses force, right? Whereas female bullies are more calculated in their words, right? They're heard with their words more. So it's more an emotional type of bullying, I would say.
That acted towards you in a bullying and detestable manner. It's very difficult for women to cope with that because they don't have any real recourse. And female bullying can be unbelievably vicious. And usually that takes the shape of reputation destruction, innuendo, and gossip. It's well documented.
Yeah.
It's very
Only
difficult to
women,
defend.
but
No, men do it too, but men...
But not to
no,
that extent.
sorry,
patterns-
disproportionately women, in your view,
Yes.
or not? Sorry.
Yes,
Yes.
disproportionately women. That's what the data indicate. I mean, if
But
men
where
are...
is the
if-
data on innuendo and gossip?
Well, it's among antisocial behavior among adolescents. It's a well-documented field. So, because people look at aggressive and antisocial behavior in women and in men. And in women, it tends to take the expression of innuendo, gossip, and reputation destruction. And in men, it tends to take the form of outright
Rage.
physical aggression.
There we go.
There's a whole literature on that. It's not a surprise to anyone. This has been known for 30 years. I mean, the rates of
I think the
antisocial...
idea of the female gossip probably predates 30 years.
Well, it does,
By a
it
long
does.
time, but that doesn't. No, it
No,
doesn't
but-
make it gospel.
But
really,
people
does it?
have no, it doesn't. But people have looked at how women express. Look, women have to express aggression somehow, unless you're willing to say that they're not aggressive. They
And
tend
they
not
are.
to do it physically,
Exactly.
not to the degree men do. So they use other channels. And
They
what
have
other
to.
channels are there? Other
They have to. If you have that built-up aggression, you have that built-up frustration within you. How do you get it out? There has to be some form of release. And often for men, it's, as you said, physical aggression. But for women, it tends to be more of innuendo. It tends to be more gossip. They tend to convey that frustration, not in a physical way, right? But they tend to project it onto other females, right? Or to other people in general. That's how I understand what he's saying. But it's a very interesting debate to be had.
But
really,
people
does it?
have no, it doesn't. But people have looked at how women express. Look, women have to express aggression somehow, unless you're willing to say that they're
Yeah.
not aggressive. They tend not to do it physically, not to the degree men do. So they use other channels. And what other channels are there other than physical aggression? If you're going to be aggressive, well, you go after people verbally.
Yeah.
You go after them with innuendo and gossip and reputation destruction, and that's how it works.
And just to be clear, that you think that's predominantly a female modus operandi?
Yes,
it isn't that I think that.
it is that.
It's
That's
that
what
the
it is.
clinical literature indicates that. It isn't that I think it.
Well, I'm not interviewing the clinical literature. I'm interviewing you. What do you
Well,
think?
I'm a psychologist and a scientist,
You
and
can
I tend
cite
to base my opinions on what I've read in the broad, relevant clinical literature. I'm not making this stuff up. I studied antisocial behavior for like 15 years. I'm actually quite an expert on it.
Damn.
And so we know that men are more likely to look at it this way. All right. Women are much more likely to try to commit suicide. And men are much more likely to kill themselves. And the reason for that is that men use lethal force and women don't. Now that's a big difference.
That's actually very
okay, so then
interesting.
you say,
So but then why is the suicide rate amongst men higher than it is amongst women? But women, at the same time, you're saying that women have a greater tendency to commit suicide than men. I don't understand how that matches up, quite honestly. But let's hear
and
it.
men are much more likely to kill themselves. And the reason for that is that men use lethal force and women don't. Now that's a big difference. Okay, so then you say, well, women manifest aggression towards themselves and to others, but they don't use lethal force. They don't use physical force the same way men do. So they have to do it some other way.
Why do
well, what
they
are the
have
other
to
ways?
do something some other way? That you
Because
can take
people
your
are
Hobbesian
aggressive.
war against, so you're basically a Hobbesian. Life is
No,
a
I'm
war of
half
all
and
against
half,
all.
half and half, half Hobbes, half Rousseau. That's why I'm not an ideologue, because I don't think that people are good or evil. I think they're both.
Both,
I don't
yeah.
think that culture is security or tyranny. I think
both.
it's both. And I don't think that nature is benevolence or catastrophe. I think it's both, and that's why I'm not an ideologue. And I mean,
And where
Well-
do you stand on the Me Too campaign? Good
Let's
thing?
hear it.
I think that it
Well, let's
risks
continue.
damaging the presumption of innocence. I mean, there's plenty
Is there
of...
more to it than that?
Oh, sure. Women face the arbitrary admixture of sexual advance and workplace performance all the time. It's a very complicated thing to sort out. We don't know how to sort it out exactly because, I mean, NBC, for example, the American TV station, has made it policy that you're not to hug your coworkers.
Okay.
Which, may be true.
Yes.
Although I don't think it's the sort of thing that a corporation might be deciding for people. But we don't know exactly what the rules are for governing male and female behavior in the workplace because we've only been working together for about 35 years.
That's
We
actually
don't know. After 35 years, wouldn't it be possible to figure something out?
Not when you're talking about a transformation in behavior that's that profound.
And it's not, I mean, it's not a natural thing that social interaction is a natural thing. And if you want to control that natural instinct, it's going to be very hard to control it in the first place. Because remember that biologically you're born with certain instincts, right? You're born with a certain attraction towards the opposite sex. Now, not everyone, I'm not generalizing here, but generally you're born with that natural attraction to the opposite sex. So to control something as natural as that in a workplace setting is obviously going to be difficult. But a few very interesting things here, and the thing that I found most interesting is that he said that women have a greater tendency to commit suicide, but still, if I'm correct, the suicide rate amongst men is higher. So why do you guys think that discrepancy is there? Let me know in the comment section. I do hope you enjoyed today's video. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you next time.